Hello, everyone. Welcome along to Customer Spotlight with Precursive. I am delighted today to be joined by Julian, the Head of Revenue Operations for Procurify, one of our customers who has been doing some very elegant and innovative things in and around customer onboarding. So thanks for coming on, Julian. Do appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, pleasure to be here and speak to everybody once again.
Yeah, how are you? How are things?
Yeah, we're doing fine. I'm based in Vancouver, British Columbia, in Canada. It may not sound like that, but yeah, based out on the West Coast, and the organization is working its way through the various crises pretty well right now. We're seeing business ticking upwards. And our solution is meeting a lot of the needs for people today with the movements towards things like remote working and democratization of people buying things. So yeah, we're doing pretty well from the business perspective as well.
Good to hear. To tell everyone a little bit about what Procurify does, if you don't mind.
Yeah, we position ourselves as being an organization in the area of managing spend. So we help organizations to better manage the way that they spend their hard-earned cash. So we provide mechanisms, for example, for people to request things to be purchased, for approval routing to happen, but behind the scenes for things to happen with integration with things such as invoicing, the purchasing systems, the back office, and so on, integration with budgeting, and a lot of reports that allow people to understand how are people spending inside their organization and to look for rationalization of where that spend might happen. So we appeal to mostly organizations who feel that they need to get a control over how they're spending their cash. And they've got usually some kind of distributed area where there are people in multiple locations or people in multiple different roles who are trying to spend their organization's cash in different ways.
Okay. Well, it's been incredibly important for companies to get on top of their spend very, very quickly. And I know that we've talked a number of times and communicated about the impact that has on the customer success organization and for the post-sale implementation or post-sale onboarding, because there's, companies need to get on top of it very, very quickly. So I know that you've been experiencing a lot of different things really over the last 6 months. I mean, really the purpose of these conversations is to share really some best practices, some different ways of working, so that our customers have ideas and innovations around how they can improve some of their processes. Ultimately, there's a goal amongst everyone really to how can we deliver more value more quickly, and there's a lot of pressure to do so. So delighted to have you sharing some of the insights here. I think just in terms of framing this discussion, this I don't know, a little bit of an in-joke, but fundamentally, we talked about this actually on our podcast, right? It's like if you're looking to grow your business, it's very difficult to do so if you're spending all of that time and effort on customer acquisition and bringing customers in the door, only for it to fail on liftoff, right? So that first initial customer onboarding, that first experience that they have with you, there's so much emotion attached to that, because oftentimes these sales cycles can be taking, it doesn't matter whether it's a month or whether it's a year, they're time intensive. And so there's a lot of pent up excitement, but also nervousness for customers to get their hands on your product or service very quickly. And I know that you've been dealing with this and experiencing it. So I think what I want to do is just kind of introduce a little bit about what you're doing, and perhaps we can just, if we move on to this slide, this just gives a very simple summary of kind of how you're using Salesforce and Precursive, just in your own words. I know you've worked with us many times before in other businesses, but just talk us through kind of that flow, if you will, from sales through to onboarding and into customer success. Kind of what does that look like from a systems and an applications perspective?
Yeah, well, our solution is a SaaS solution, software as a service solution. So we go through a sales process, which usually involves a sales executive who, towards the end of the process, would normally get engaged with an onboarding manager. We call them our PSCs, professional services consultants, who would be then walking the customer through their implementation. So at the time of contract signature, there's an expectation set with the customer about how long that implementation is going to take place. And what we do is that we look at the solution that's being sold, and we put it into a number of different buckets, if you like, depending on the plan that's been sold. And we have kind of 4 or 5 different ways of bringing our customer on board, depending on the complexity of what they've bought. The way that we then do that is that we apply templates from Precursive based upon what's being purchased by the client, and that lays out the project plan for what's going to happen when and at what point the customer is expected to go live. It also lays out what the responsibilities are on our team, what the responsibilities are on the customer team, and sets expectations on the number of hours to be spent, the number of days to be spent. So once we kick that off, we roll that through Precursive, which is then setting up the tasks for the PSC team, and obviously we keep track of those tasks, and we keep track of how we're doing in that project through to the end.
Yeah, we've got an example here. So this is for those of you viewing the screen now, this is an example of a project plan in Precursive that Procurify uses. So Julian, just talk us through a little bit about, because there's obviously various things that's happening here. Talk us through a little bit about kind of how you guys think about organizing this. And I noticed, for example, that there are the different things that you do are mapped out, e.g. client calls, configuration, because I think you're sharing these plans with the customer, right? So that they know what's happening and when.
Yeah, I mean, the key thing for us is are we meeting the customer expectations here in terms of when they're going to be able to get value and go live? Everything else is kind of immaterial from the customer's perspective. Is, look, I'm expecting to go live on such and such a day. Are we still on track for that? Mm-hmm. So from the customer perspective, that's essential, and we need to get early warnings if things are going to be going late. So what we do is we lay out what we believe the journey should look like. But we track very carefully the achievement of each of those individual goals, and we look at its effect on the overall plan. And this allows us then to very quickly communicate with the customer on any potential delays. So it allows us to go and look at an overall level across our customer base. How are we doing in terms of meeting our deliverables here? And it doesn't mean that we are always going to finish on time. Sometimes we can finish early, sometimes we can finish late. And these plans are only really, as I mentioned before, a template. But it does give flexibility to our team to say, well, actually, we think that we can do this faster here. Okay, we don't think we need to spend 2 weeks on this. I think that in this case, we can accelerate it. So we try to bring things forward. The idea being then, if we establish that there's a general way of shortening the time, we can then create or adjust a template and say, well, actually, from now on, this is now the template. So instead of being a 60-day implementation, it might now be a 50-day implementation for this type of client. So yeah, we track the tasks, and ultimately we want to know, is this project on time? Is it late? And then we feed back at a high level, how are we doing in these different types of plans? Is there ways that we can shave off days?
Okay, great. So you've got the sales team, they're managing deals in Salesforce, and then when you close those deals or at a late stage, it's looking at probably the product or some other identification information in the opportunity, and then it's spitting out a project plan in the form of this template in Precursive, which people can manage in this the Kanban view or a Gantt chart or whatever it may be. And then sharing that with the client so they know kind of what's happening and when, and things like whether you're on track or not. What have you, I'm curious to know, like, because what have you learned over time around these repeatable processes? So you talked about the fact that, well, when we were talking earlier, you were talking about how there's perhaps some different expectations now onto how fast work can be delivered or when customers want to see that value. What have you learned over time about how to create these repeatable processes, these repeatable playbooks that you can share with others if they're thinking about how to introduce this in their organizations?
Yeah, well, when we first created them, we were just taking the ideas that the PSCs had and maybe had been storing on bits of paper what that process needed to be, and say, okay, well, let's just go and look at what we think these are going to be. But they're ever evolving. We also know that you can't be very few of them actually go exactly to plan. Some things are faster, some things are slower. So it has to be seen that it is just a template, but over time, those templates should be adjusted. So I think the key is to always keep an eye on the template. Don't fix yourself into, oh, it takes 30 days, or it takes 60 days. You should always be looking to say, well, is there a way in which we can cut that down? Yep. Is there a way that we can still deliver value, but we want to be able to make that faster? So I think that always having the mindset that the template is there as a guide, but you need to be constantly adjusting it. And we're finding that this is one of the real strengths of Precursive, is the ability for us to very quickly decide, hey, there's probably a better way of doing this. Let's go and create a new template, which we can start to apply from now on. Or even personalized templates. We can take an individual template and say, well, in this case, we think that this particular customer, we can actually set the expectation up front with the customer that we can do this even faster because of X, Y, and Z. So I think that the flexibility there of Precursive in terms of quickly creating templates and then personalizing those templates to an individual account when you want to set a different expectation from normal.
Okay, cool. Well, the new template builder, you might have seen the announcement on the new release. You'll be able to build some of these plans, like innovate on them. So think about kind of what are the learnings, build them out, and then snap them into a template straight away, rather than sort of taking them, putting in a file and loading it, which is relatively quick and straightforward anyway. But I think that template builder will be super interesting for you. So yeah, I'll send you the link afterwards, and you can check out. There's a nice GIF on it. I think one of the I'm just curious to get your thoughts on this, right? Because on how you maybe think about, like you say, these plans are a template, and I think one of the things that companies are maybe not doing as much as they should is looking at that pre-sale experience, and in particular the timeline for it. So, for example, let's say you bring in two customers. It's the same product. I think it's Voyager's one of your implementation plans. So let's say it's two Voyager implementations, but one took 6 months to close and one took 3 months to close. There's kind of like different expectations or urgency then from the customer to see something. Curious, like, is that something that, because I know you're sitting across in commercial operations, across looking at both success, onboarding, and sales. So do you look at that type of thing and say, okay, we need to think differently based on sales cycle times or sales cycle dynamics, for example?
Not particularly. I think we set the expectation with the client based on the plan. We say, okay, you're buying this solution. Typically, this is going to take X days to implement.
Right. Okay.
And so we don't actually differentiate based on the length of the time cycle. It is very much driven by the plan that they're purchasing, but also by the use case. So what does feed into it is the specific use case based upon what they're buying. So we've got a number of different features that are available within the plans, but if a customer is only actually interested in using a smaller number, then we can say, well, okay, well, there may be ways in which we can cut this down, in which case we would talk with that individual client about, well, you're only going to need these features. Well, instead of taking, maybe 30 days, I think we can probably do this in less. So we then get the confirmation with the professional services consultant to say, yeah, it looks like this one, we can set the expectancy with the customer that it's going to take this long. And it may be longer if they've got extra complexity that we need to take into account. So I think that it's always having in mind what the customer's expectations are and trying to meet those or beat those wherever possible, while being as realistic as possible as well.
Okay, cool. Let's move on and look at what we're doing, what you guys are doing here, which is around the move our faces up here, for example. So I think this is actually it's quite simple in the sense that you're tracking these delays that we mentioned, but the way that you're using that information to inform product development or what the ways that you deliver explain to everyone what it is that you're actually doing here and why. I think it's great.
On any project, there's likely to be some element of that project is going to be delayed. And what we really wanted to know was that the premise before we had Precursive was, it always gets delayed because of the customer. It's something the customer is doing, like they couldn't find the resources, or they were late doing this, or they couldn't get the training done in time, or some other reason. But we didn't know what percentage of delays were caused by customer issues. We didn't know what percentage were caused by our own internal issues. So is it our own resourcing that was the problem? Was it the product? Were we finding that the product was causing delays? So a lot of it was basically anecdotal, but we didn't really understand what the reason for the delays were. We knew that people were taking too long, but not why. So this has really allowed us to drill into the reasons why a project or an individual part of a project may be delayed. And of course, understanding why means once you understand why, you know what you can do about it. So for example, if we're discovering that the delays are due to some internal issues of our own, well, that's something we can fix. If we find that, yeah, the delay was maybe something related to a bug in the product. So maybe you're trying to implement part of the solution. There was a bug and we had to wait on that bug to be fixed. Then we can build that into our expectations. Similarly, if we find that a lot of the delays were around customers not being able to, for example, carry out their user acceptance testing in time, well, we say, well, is there ways in which we can accelerate that? Is there better materials we can give to the customer to improve their UAT? Is there maybe some hand-holding that we can do with the customer to accelerate that? So it gives us the ability to say, how can we now mitigate that? And so it's not just the reason for why the whole project, it's getting down to that individual task, saying, why was this task delayed? Which allows us to make those incremental reductions in the expectations of how long it takes to do the implementation. So yeah, it's been an essential part for us. And interestingly enough, of course, in the last few months, we're seeing very different reasons than we expected to when we set the system up in January. Of course, a huge number of the reasons for delay now are customer related. It's, well, the customer's just they're furloughed, or they're trying to work remotely and they've not managed to get themselves organized yet, or they're doing a reorg, or they're going out of business. Many reasons why. So that's been we've been kind of obviously blindsided by that, but it does allow us now to see why those delays are happening. And what we're finding is that we've got two extremes. We have some projects that are accomplished very, very quickly. And we've got some that are now taking a huge amount of time and are still ongoing, just purely because the customers don't have the resources to carry on with the implementation correctly. So we're having to deal with those different circumstances. Okay.
And tell us a little bit about the customer sentiment piece that you've got here. So we've got the customer sentiment, a 4, for example. Is this, this is some predictive work that you're trying to do here? Tell us a bit more about that.
We use NPS, as most organizations do, as a kind of overall satisfaction, but NPS is not a good indicator as you're going through a project. So we typically run NPS to like the administrators and the champions and the end users once the project's been initiated. But we don't know going through the project, does a customer feel good about it? And we want to be able to track that over time. So this is in lieu of having NPS. So this is something which we allow the professional services consultant just to at any point say the customer's really unhappy right now. They're a 1 out of 5, or the customer's feeling really good. We've just done the UAT, we've just done the user acceptance testing, and they're all euphoric about it. Great, they feel good, and that of course then feeds back into the tracking where we can go and look at the sentiment over time. And if we're seeing, for example, a trending downwards, then we know that that's an issue that we need to start raising. Maybe somebody else can get involved, or there's an escalation involved. Because we know that if there's a lot of 0s and 1s in that project, then the chances are that they're not going to be happy. So we need to then put in place some kind of mitigation strategy. So it's really important for us to get that view. It's not the customer's own entry here. This is the assessment of the professional services.
Right. Okay. Cool. Very useful. No, I like that. Again, it's taking the emotion out of it, because it's giving you like a data-driven sentiment on, what are the trends across all of these projects. If you've got hundreds of projects and you can see the sentiment across them, then like that's hugely valuable in terms of understanding like a portfolio of work that could be going, rapidly off the rails or doing brilliantly well. So no, super cool. Yeah. Cool. This dashboard here. So Precursive is native to Salesforce, and therefore generates obviously reporting and analytics and insights using the Salesforce reporting engine, pushing our data and other pieces of data. You can visualize that in different ways. We've just highlighted here a few of these data points. So just talk people through kind of what we're looking at here, kind of from top left, and then we'll zero in on some of the highlighted ones.
Yeah, this is a dashboard that is used by the professional services team, but there's also access to that from kind of the senior management as well. So this is kind of a typical live dashboard, which is looking at the status of the current implementation. So we're looking, for example, at how many customers are in onboarding at any given time. This is really the portfolio of work that we have on hand now, broken down by the types of plans that we have. But we also want to go and look at things such as, well, how many of them have gone live this quarter? How many went live last quarter? So we can go and look at how fast are things moving. We also try and look at the overall onboarding days. And I'm never particularly keen on this one. You need to look at this in association with lots of others, because this is just an average of all the customers who went live this quarter. How long have they spent to do that? So it's a bit of a lagging indicator, because if you started working on a customer a year ago and they went on now, you've got a 365 in there. But I'll talk a little bit later about some of the further breakdown that we do. We use CSAT surveys as well to go and look at the satisfaction of the client post implementation. So this is from the sentiment analysis, and you can also see that we've got the at-risk analysis, which is going to look in fact at the Salesforce data. What this actually goes and looks is at the accounts in Salesforce for all of those organizations who are going onboarding, and goes and looks at any risk reasons that the customer success manager has been entering. So, for example, we can go and see, for example, if you look at the third one down at bar chart, it says uncontrollable company changes. So that's telling us that of all of the 88 clients who are currently onboarding, 3 of them are actually at risk right now because of changes within their organization. So this kind of thing, such as the company's going out of business, or something such as that. So this just allows us to assess the kind of risk and the reasons for that risk, which you can see in the pie chart on the left as well, which is talking about why those whose accounts they are, and these are the reasons why things are at risk.
Okay, I mean, you understand very clearly the link between time to value and obviously retention and growth. Given given what's been going on this year with COVID, tell us a little bit about how I'll come off the share now for a minute, and we can just have a chat about this. But tell us a little bit about kind of how now you've got some really accelerated timelines in some of your industries. Tell folks about kind of it, because we're talking about 90 days, but you've got some stuff that you're trying to deliver in a week or a day now, right?
Yeah, and this is all down to customer expectations, and there's a couple of things affecting this. One is the move to people working remotely.
Yeah.
And remember, we're what's called the spend management solution, which means we help people spend the company's money. So what we're finding is that people working remotely have got a demand. They need to purchase things to help them work remotely, whatever industry that they happen to be in.
Yep.
And what that means is that if you're an end user, let's say that you're a teacher in a school, or that you're a laboratory assistant working in a pharmaceutical company, or you're a marketer working in a software company, you need to spend that money. You need it now. You need your test tubes. You need your books. You need money to pay for that event. You need it now. So you don't want to wait 2 months while the accounting team goes and sets up all of your system with all the chart of accounts and all of the budgets and all the complex integration approval flows. No, you just want your book, and you want it. You want it tomorrow. So the expectancy from the end users of our system is accelerating. And what we've found now is that because of that demand, The expectancy is that we get time to first value is now being measured rather than time to overall value. And the way that the way that I often I explain it is that for somebody who's maybe an accountant, they understand the complexity of what they're trying to achieve, and they would be quite happy if in 30 or 60 days time they had all this stuff set up, because they know the complexity of their chart of accounts.
Yep.
But they're happy with it. But an end user, somebody who wants to spend money, isn't. They want it tomorrow. So what we're having to do is change the focus of our implementation to time to first value.
Yep.
And instead of waiting for that overall approach, say, okay, now let's get everything set up and now we'll worry about the end users. No, we're looking to start with the end user and say, well, okay, we know the chart of accounts may not be set up, but somebody still needs approval on buying this stuff, and we want to have an approval trail. Is that something that we need to do? And if the answer is yes, we can do that really fast.
Yeah.
But it means that our project plans now need to be reversed. So instead of ending up with your end user training, you start with the end user training.
Yep.
And you use a very simple use case. And so it means that we've had to look very carefully at the expectations of the client. If the expectation of the client is driven by end users, then we need to have this very, very rapid deployment process, which focuses on a very simple use case. You can request stuff, you can have it approved by somebody, and you can then go ahead and buy it, and if necessary, expense it. Great, we can do that within a couple of days. But it means that then there are then other pressures on us, because all of our resources for onboarding have been focused on those people who've bought the solution, maybe the accounting user or the finance user. So it means that we've got to very quickly create resources to allow those end users en masse to be onboarded. There's no longer time to do a train the trainer approach. We need to now go directly to those end users. So we've had to go and create a lot of work within our resource building team to create online resources. Also, very, very useful for us has been integration with a tool called Gainsight, which again we know that Precursive work quite closely with, to build on what's called their journey orchestrator, so that we can then push things through Gainsight based on what the end user has been doing in the tool. So maybe the first time that an end user logs on, we're sending them resources now to say, okay, so you've logged on for the first time. This is how you can go and request your first order. As soon as they've made their request, we can send them a message. By the way, this is what's happening to your order. Expect it to come back for your approval like this. When it comes back, you can do X with it. So by building in the new Precursive project plans and then integrating that with things such as the journey orchestrator and building our resources, it's allowing us to shave that time to value down from maybe 30 or 60 days, depending on the plan, to in some cases less than a week. So that's really the scale of things that we're trying to aim at. It's directly as a result of the focus on end user experience, and end users can be very, very impatient. They've got their phone and they want to request something, so they're expecting a consumer grade product, whereas an accountant is expecting more of a enterprise grade product with the bells and whistles. All the end user wants to do is ask for something and get their approval, and they want to do that as easy as sending an email or as easy as ordering something on Amazon.
No, I think this, you called it like time to value for who, right? I think there's a few key things that the best companies are thinking about. They're thinking about time to value for who, like are we able to deliver first value to potentially an audience where they're very vocal? And I think that's something that's been like that the world has changed, right? If companies think that they just can get a good relationship with an executive and that will be enough for a long period of time, they don't realize the pain of like 5 people, 10 people, 20 people, 200 people all peppering them internally with like, why haven't I got what I need or what I want? Why have I got to wait? There's this immediacy which we all have in our consumer lives where you can get food, drink, and whatever you need delivered to your house very, very easily. And then in the B2B markets, there's this like, we got to crank the crankshaft, and then it's 90 days, 100 days, 200 days to deliver something. And I think that's very true. I think the other thing that you've highlighted is this time to first value. I think companies have got to be shifting their thinking from kind of like implementations and go lives to experience, and first value, and start thinking about in that customer journey, what's the second value? What's the third value? because the other thing I think that most organizations have is like, they may have sell-on opportunities, upsell opportunities, cross-sell opportunities with this customer. And if you can be delivering that incremental second or third value to them inside 3-6 months, you've got a high likelihood of closing those additional deals much sooner than you would do thinking the other way about it. So no, I mean, I think what you're doing is as I've always said, I think super interesting. And talk to us about this 0 to 10. So you were telling me about this before, like 0 to 10. What are we talking about here? Final thought.
This is around value.
Yeah.
There's lots of ways that companies will assess what the value is, but I look at it
Yeah.
very simply on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 means you're getting no value from the solution. 10 means it's brilliant. It's doing everything that you wanted.
Like Precursive, right? Precursive is 10.
So you always have a 0 to 10, and typically in our implementation process, and again, we're relatively short compared to a lot of ERP companies, for example.
Yeah, definitely.
You might say, well, okay, let's say that we're going to do a traditional implementation where we get everything set up right in the first place. And it might take, depending on the plan, it might take 30 days, it might take 60 days. So on day 7, your value is 0. On day 20, your value is 0 because you're still setting up. On day 30, your value may still be 0. And at some point, let's say that it was a fairly complex implementation, it had taken 60 days. Well, suddenly you go from 0 up to day 59, and then suddenly you might jump to, depending to maybe a 5, a 6, or 7, 8, 9, doesn't matter. But basically you go from 0 straight to that. What we really want to do is say, actually, on day 2, we can actually have you at a 4. So somebody is getting value, and it may just be that we've now got the ability for people to request and approve certain types of purchases amongst a small number of people. On day 7, it might be a 6 because you've managed to extend it to some other people. And eventually, though, you say, okay, we've got those people running, and after a couple of weeks, we're actually at a 7, whereas in the original plan we're still at a 0. So now we've got a lot of reasonably happy people around. And we then build on that, and then we try to, of course, then say, now we've got to go back and build in the complexity and build in all your budgets and go and build in all your complex integrations and workflows, and gradually step up. So hopefully by the end of 60, you're at that same level that you would have been anyway. So you're now at 10. So time to value is trying to get away from that 0 to 8 or 0 to 10 on day 60. It's right. We actually want to go from a 0 to then a 4, then to a 5, then a 6, and a 7, because that helps people tie in, and you're proving success all the way along. Say, look at the great stuff we've done. We've got all these happy people already. Isn't this going well? And in situations that we're facing right now, that early success tends to translate into, we're hoping, translates into longer term success, because you've got lots more happy people. It makes it more difficult for people to say, actually, we don't need this anymore. But you've got a lot of happy people who are getting the stuff they want to buy, and they've got an easy experience, and it's smooth.
Yeah, no, I think lots of insights. I mean, I think for those watching this, I think the way that you use the word experience a lot, I mean, is why we call our product onboarding experience, because I do, again, I think that there's a very significant shift for businesses to think about, like, we got to stop thinking in terms of, like, the old world of being like these slow implementations and go lives, and we got to think about the experience and the emotion that's associated with this process and all that engenders long term, right? And what always comes across in talking to you, and I'm really grateful for the time, is like, I think you really appreciate, and your business really appreciates, that the art of customer success a lot of the time is being creative with the customer. When you've got time with them about helping them with their business, helping them to think about, in your case, like how to optimize spend at a very difficult time, economically speaking, how to do that at scale. And really, there's always this numeracy and this science that underpins a lot of what you do, which is okay, that stuff, that art piece is really hard, takes a lot of work, takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of coaching. Let's make sure that the underbelly of all of this just runs really smoothly, really efficiently, and we've got data to make better decisions so that we can do this other stuff. And we almost like free up a lot of time to focus on the hard stuff, which is the being creative, right? If you're battling this chaos it's very hard to get the time back, to take a breath, to think, okay, like you said, you've had certain markets which you've identified that are new markets for you to go in and build go-to-market team, build customer success plans, build new ways of working. You can't do that stuff if you're chasing your tail, right? If you're operationally inefficient, you'll never get around to it. So I think
Yeah, and
there's a load of learnings.
yeah, and you've got to be prepared to change tack on a frequent basis.
Yeah.
You need to recognize very early on when you need to make a change, and when you need to go and have a different way of doing things. And some things are easy, and some things are difficult. One of the things that we found was that some of the things in the product were inhibiting our ability to do some of these things very, very rapidly. So that's where it then has to come back onto the product team that says, well, actually, to enable this, we need to change X, Y, and Z inside the product itself that will make this even easier in the onboarding process. So all of these things are interlinked. The markets you're going after, the expectations of the market, the way that you define success for that market, and the way that you adapt your product to make them able to be successful with your product. So all these things are interlinked, which is why we look at an entire ecosystem to support that, which is why interchangeably we think about Salesforce, and we think about Precursive, and we move data between the two, and we push data out to people, and we have Gainsight playing a game there, and Precursive is helping feed the Gainsight health scores, which then affect the way that we deal with the customer and feeds back to product. So all of these things are interlinked.
Yeah. Wonderful. And that was Mojo the cat. Is he back?
Mojo's back.
Mojo's back. Awesome. For those, Mojo's going to be a special guest next time. Mojo is Julian's cat. So much like the Mojo that you've got going on in customer onboarding. And on that really bad joke, I think we'll finish it. Thanks ever so much, Julian.
Sounds good. Thanks very much, Jonathan.
All right. Cheers.
Guys now who are still on the call, we'll be sending out the video to everyone who's on the call and who's signed up. So that will probably go out tomorrow morning UK time, and you'll be able to have a recording of that as well. And we'll also be taking all your follow-up questions and putting that into a spreadsheet with the answers either from Jonathan or Julian. I don't know if Jonathan's still on the line because he just messaged me saying he's having connection issues.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. You're through, Jonathan. This is like Eurovision. We have some questions on the line there. If people who are still around,
I saw Jenny's question. Hi, Jenny. So the answer to your first question. So yes, you can tie the time that would be tracked in Precursive back into a finance system or a PSA system like Financial Force. Actually, one of our other customers does that. We also provide a PSA solution similar to Financial Force ourselves. But yes, it can be used to feed into those project budgets. Do we provide calendar scheduling capabilities? Yes, we do. If you're talking about then moving that over into like Google Calendar or Outlook, then yes, that can be done as well. I don't know if that's exactly what you mean, but yes, we do a lot of resource scheduling and staff scheduling, where you want to understand the capacity and the availability of people and who's working on what. Oh, okay, cool. Outlook, yes, you can. Where have you been effective in convincing prospects that the information monitored and managed in the system is critical to client experience, where those prospects believe that that data is valuable, is not valuable? Let me see there. Sorry, the questions were moving up. So where have you been effective in convincing prospects that the information monitored is critical to client experience? I'm not sure. Is Jenny on the line?
They won't have access to voice, I'm afraid.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that if I understand the question correctly, which I may not do, so forgive me, but we always find that the information in this system is always really important to the customer or to the prospective customers. So sometimes our customers would be sharing certain activities or plans, like what does their implementation plan look like, or what does their onboarding plan look like at a pre-sales stage. So prior to signing a contract, let's imagine I'm the salesperson, I share that plan with the customer so that they can see what's going to happen. And so a number of companies will use that as a mechanism to educate the customer on what is going to happen if they, sign up. Increasingly, our customers are sharing these, a version of these onboarding plans or project management templates, depending on the language that the customer uses. What they will typically do is they'll share the activities that are of most importance to the customer. So the things that the customer needs to do and when, and potentially the level of effort that is required during that onboarding process on their part. So imagine you've got to spend a certain amount of time on UAT, and therefore we share that information with you.
So Jenny's followed that up, saying she's in onboarding and her company doesn't seem to believe that that type of data is worthwhile to monitor. And she's looking for suggestions to convince decision makers on the value of a solution like that.
Okay, cool. Well, I would imagine, Jenny, that in your CRM system right now, there's probably some upsell opportunities or cross-sell opportunities with existing customers. And those are likely predicated on the customer receiving value or getting a return on investment on their initial investment. So some of your peers will look at accounts where, let's say you delivered value to the customer in 30 days, for argument's sake, and you did that consistently, and the customer was then happy to spend more money with you or buy additional products or services from you. So what customers will often do is analyze that type of information and compare where onboarding's taken more or less time as a means to show the company, look, if we do this really well, companies will buy more from us. They will become brand ambassadors. They will advocate on our behalf. So that's something that you can use if it's quite a commercially orientated organization that's perhaps a little bit cares a bit more about the sales than they do necessarily the post-sale experience. There's a direct correlation between onboarding time and churn. There's various research out there from Gartner, Chargeify, Retently that looks at that as well, that might be able to support you.
And it's as people move from just the physical onboarding to the actual outcomes of what you've onboarded, that's what you need to be measuring, right, with the customer. So that's often half the challenge.
Yeah. Hopefully that helped, Jenny.
Still got some time for any other questions if people want to ping them in the Q&A. We're happy to stay on. We've got people returning to us, which is interesting.
Back for more.
Back for more.
On a Thursday. Cool. Any other questions? If you've got any further questions, you can drop us a line at hello@precursive.com or go to our blog, which has often got, we think some useful information on there and insights on the industry. And at the end of this month, actually, we'll be releasing our customer onboarding benchmark survey. So over the last 3 years, we have conducted research now across more than 400 companies, across both the SMB, hypergrowth area, mid-market and enterprise, incorporating high-tech, healthcare, industry, professional services, telecommunications, really exploring what are the most progressive organizations doing with regards to customer onboarding from a people, process, and technology perspective. So that the results of the 2020 survey is coming out towards the end of this month, and you can register your interest for that on our website as well.
I'll put a link in the follow-up email to everyone who's registered today, so you'll have easy access to that. Great. Well, if that's the end, thank you very much, Jonathan, and thank you to Julian prior to that. We thank you for joining on such a busy day of the week for everyone around the world. And hopefully we'll see you on a Precursive webinar very soon. So thank you for your time and have a great evening or day.
Take care, everybody.